Ford spent $5.8 billion to prove that America could manufacture the battery of the future right here in Kentucky. The plant ran for 4 months. In December 2025, Ford CEO Jim Farley told the Wall Street Journal what came next. Instead of plowing billions into the future, knowing these large EVs will never make money, we are pivoting. The Blue Oval SK battery park in Glendale, Hardin County, built to power the Ford F-150 Lightning, would be converted into something else. The approximately 1,600 workers who had been hired to run it were told their last day would come 60 days after receiving notice. 5,000 jobs promised, 1,600 delivered, then eliminated. The town of Glendale, population roughly 1,900, never saw a single vehicle come off that line. What it got was a pivot and a layoff, followed by a $2 billion promise that the next version of the deal would be better than the first. That's the cleanest description of what happened to the largest economic development deal in Kentucky history. It's not the full one. Ford is still in Glendale. The company is pouring another $2 billion into the facility, has launched a subsidiary, and has a signed customer. County officials say they're grateful Ford didn't walk away. And they may be right to say that, because this isn't a story about a company that left. It's a story about a company that stayed and quietly changed what it was building, for whom, and with whose technology, after the community had already paid the cost of the first version of the plan. Economists have a name for this sequence. When manufacturing investment arrives, reshapes a community's infrastructure and expectations, then contracts or redirects before delivering its promised scale. They call it de-industrialization, the same structural pattern that hollowed out the Rust Belt city by city across Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania through the 1980s and 90s. Glendale is not Detroit. The plant didn't close, but the mechanism, community absorbs the cost, corporation adjusts the terms, is recognizable to anyone who has studied what happened to those places. Glendale sits just off I-65 between Louisville and Nashville in Hardin County, Kentucky. Before September 2021, the exit most people knew it for was the Whistle Stop restaurant, a southern food institution that started inside a hardware store in 1975. The town holds the Glendale Crossing Festival every third Saturday in October, known for antiques and crafts. Railroad tracks have run through since 1864, when the community was still called Walker's Station. Hardin County's economy has long run on Fort Knox, the military installation to the northeast. A structural dependence on federal payroll that economists sometimes compare to communities affected by BRAC, the base realignment and closure process, where a single federal decision can reshape a county's entire economic identity. Manufacturing was present but modest. The county median household income in 2010 was $43,421. Not wealthy, not distressed, just a working county waiting for its next chapter. That chapter was supposed to arrive in 2009. In April of that year, Governor Steve Beshear announced that the National Alliance for Advanced Transportation Batteries, a consortium of more than 50 corporations, had identified the 1,551-acre state-owned industrial site in Glendale for a lithium-ion battery plant for hybrid and electric vehicles. The project was expected to employ 1,500 to 2,000 people. It never happened. The site sat, the county kept waiting, and 12 years passed before Ford and South Korean battery company SK On arrived with something far larger. In September 2021, the two companies announced the Blue Oval SK joint venture, a 50-50 partnership, 2 plants on the same 1,500-acre site, $5.8 billion in total investment, 5,000 jobs. Governor Andy Beshear toured the construction site and called it nothing short of incredible. Republican officials who'd spent years opposing EV mandates backed it anyway, because 5,000 manufacturing jobs in a county of 110,000 people isn't an addition to the local economy. It's a transformation of its identity. The economic development incentives were substantial on every level. Consultants projected 22,000 new residents flowing into Hardin County. The county would need roughly 8,000 new housing units to absorb them. Baptist Health Hardin committed more than $200 million to a hospital expansion calibrated to that projected workforce. 2 South Korean supplier companies relocated to the Patterson Industrial Park to serve the new plant. More than $30 million went into redesigning the Glendale exit off Interstate 65. Hardin County transferred more than $27 million worth of land to Blue Oval SK. Kentucky committed $250 million in public money to the operation. Billboards appeared along the interstate, proud to be your new neighbor. The county that had run on Fort Knox payroll for decades was going to become the EV battery capital of the state. That was the deal. Now here's what happened to it. The vehicle the plant was built to serve was genuinely gaining ground. In the third quarter before the federal EV tax credit expired, the Ford F-150 Lightning was the best-selling electric truck in the United States, with 10,005 units sold and a 39.7% year-over-year increase per Electrex reporting. This wasn't a bet on a product that was failing. It was a bet on a product that was growing in a market that subsequently changed around it. In October 2023, before Kentucky 1 produced a single battery, Ford indefinitely halted construction on Kentucky 2, the second plant, citing weaker than expected EV demand. The 5,000 worker vision was effectively halved before the facility even opened. Kentucky 1 began production in August 2025. At its operational peak, it employed approximately 1,600 workers, not 5,000. Between 2020 and 2024, Hardin County's population grew by roughly 2,100 residents, not 22,000. The housing built ahead of a projected population surge sits in a county that grew by a fraction of what the consultants described. Those unoccupied units and underutilized infrastructure, built for a workforce that never fully arrived, represent what financial analysts call stranded assets, capital deployed against a future that didn't materialize at the scale promised. 4 months after Kentucky 1 began production, Ford dissolved the joint venture with SK On and announced the pivot. The plant would be retooled, and the workers would be laid off. A farmer named Houston Howlett, whose family has worked land adjacent to the Glendale campus for generations, told WDRB News what that sequence felt like from the outside. It's been so volatile from day one. You don't know what to expect. You don't know how to plan. That's not anger, that's description. And it reflects the specific experience of communities that absorb the turbulence of industrial decisions made above them. It is also, if you read the deindustrialization literature, almost verbatim what workers and farmers said in the communities that surrounded the Youngstown sheet and tube closure in 1977. The case study that scholars point to as the moment the Rust Belt pattern became visible as a pattern. Now look carefully at what the replacement deal actually contains. The batteries the converted Glendale plant will manufacture are LFP prismatic cells, battery energy storage system modules, and 20-foot DC container systems, according to Ford's December 2025 press release. The target customers are data centers, utilities, and large-scale commercial and industrial users. AI computing has driven a surge in data center energy demand, and large-scale battery storage systems have become central to how those facilities manage power loads and grid reliability. Ford sees enough demand to absorb at least 20 gigawatt-hours per year out of this one plant, and it's committing $2 billion to make that possible. On May 11, 2026, Ford formally launched Ford Energy as a wholly owned subsidiary to run the facility. 7 days later, Ford Energy signed its first commercial contract, a 5-year, up to 20 gigawatt-hour supply agreement with EDF Power Solutions North America, part of France's EDF Group, one of the largest independent renewable power developers in the United States. In energy policy terms, this is sometimes called a just transition, repurposing an industrial facility from one energy application to another rather than closing it outright. The phrase is usually applied to coal plants converting to solar. Glendale is a version of that logic applied to an EV battery plant converting to grid storage. Here's where it turns. The LFP cell chemistry Ford is using in the converted plant is licensed from contemporary AmpereX technology, known as CATL, according to Tech Times reporting in May 2026. CATL is the world's largest battery manufacturer by market share, and the Pentagon added it to its Chinese military company list in January 2025, specifically under Section 1260H of the National Defense Authorization Act, the designation framework for companies the U.S. government has formally identified as supporting Chinese military modernization. Think about what that means relative to the argument that built this facility. The case for committing $250 million in Kentucky public money, $27 million in county land, and more than $30 million in infrastructure redesign to a joint venture with South Korea was rooted partly in the logic of supply chain reshoring, the argument that domestic American battery manufacturing would reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains. The F-150 Lightning was the vehicle meant to demonstrate that American automakers could compete on the battery technology that China had spent a decade dominating. The Inflation Reduction Act's Foreign Entity of Concern provisions, the FEOC rules, were specifically designed to exclude Chinese-affiliated battery technology from federal clean energy subsidies on exactly this logic. The plant those arguments funded, on land Hardin County transferred to Ford, now runs on chemistry licensed from a company the Pentagon has formally designated a Chinese military concern under Section 1260H. Nobody in Glendale negotiated that arrangement. The cell chemistry choice wasn't a county decision. The financing structure matters here as well. Ford formally assumed a $3.8 billion Department of Energy loan originally issued to Blue Oval SK per an SEC filing made after the joint venture dissolved. The loan carries a fixed interest rate of 4.814%, and principal repayments don't begin until 2030. Ford's first customer out of Glendale is a French energy company. Its cell technology is Chinese licensed. The land is Hardin County's, and the federal loan runs for years before Ford pays $1 of principal. That's the full shape of what replaced the EV battery vision. Here's where the story resists a clean narrative. Hardin County officials aren't demanding answers. On March 27, 2026, the county's fiscal court held a special session and authorized the transfer of industrial revenue bonds from Blue Oval SK to Ford Motor Company. County Judge Executive Keith Tall said the county's last priority was to stand in Ford's way. District 4 Magistrate Fred Clem Jr. told reporters directly they chose not to walk away from Hardin County. They could have easily done that. Instead, they invested billions of dollars into Hardin County. Tall says Ford will fill the 2,100 positions the plant is projected to employ at reopening. He says Ford Energy already has 3 to 4 years of backlog orders. He expects the wages to be competitive. At Mountain Mike's Coffee House in Glendale, owners Brian and Lisa Burchard have moved through 3 versions of this story. The plant was coming, then it opened smaller than promised, then it closed and pivoted, and they've adjusted each time because that's what small businesses in small towns do when the industrial decisions around them change. Blue Oval SK workers were good for their revenue, and they're counting on Ford Energy workers being the same. That's not naivety. The alternative to Ford's pivot isn't a return of the EV battery vision. The alternative is 1,500 acres of idle industrial campus sitting off I-65, while Hardin County services the infrastructure debt it accumulated for workers who never fully arrived. Against that alternative, 2,100 Ford Energy jobs are a real result, and they're better than what would exist without them. But the arithmetic runs in one direction. Ford announced 5,000 jobs in 2021. It delivered approximately 1,600 in 2025, then eliminated them in December. It now promises 2,100 when the plant reopens in late 2027. If those positions materialize, Hardin County ends up with fewer jobs than the original announcement described. Running chemistry licensed from a company on the Pentagon's Section 1260H Chinese military company list, producing batteries for data centers rather than American pickup trucks, under a federal loan Ford absorbed from a dissolved partnership, with a French energy company as the anchor customer. Ask the hospital that expanded for a workforce of 5,000 how it plans to fill what it built. Ask the developers who constructed housing for 22,000 new residents what their occupancy looks like today. Ask the two South Korean supplier companies that relocated to Patterson Industrial Park in 2021, following a joint venture that no longer exists, what their customer base looks like now. None of those questions mean the pivot fails. The plant will run, batteries will ship, workers will get paid. But the cost of the first bet was paid by the community, and the decision to change the bet was made by the corporation, and the gap between those two facts doesn't appear in any Ford press release. This is the part that deindustrialization scholars have documented across the Rust Belt for 40 years. The public investment that precedes a factory, the roads, the utilities, the hospital wings, the schools sized for a workforce that was projected but never confirmed. Those costs don't reverse when the industrial plan changes. They become the permanent fiscal architecture of a community that bet on a version of the future that was revised above their heads. Glendale is not Youngstown. The lights are staying on. But the structure of the arrangement is familiar. The plant reopens in late 2027. Ford Energy has a contract. Kentucky's Economic Development Office has indicated the state will work to protect taxpayers as the retooling proceeds, and the county judge says the backlog is real. The open question isn't whether Ford can manufacture data center batteries in a building designed for electric vehicles. Ford has the capital, a signed customer, and a federal loan with a 2030 principal clock. The conversion will happen. The question is whether Hardin County, which invested in the first version of this deal and absorbed the full cost of its failure, gets the return of the second version in time for that return to matter. Whether 2,100 jobs fill enough of the gap left by the 22,000 residents who never came. Whether the infrastructure the county built for one industrial vision still serves the county under the industrial vision that replaced it. Hardin County signed on for an American electric future in 2021. In 2026, it's hosting a data center supply chain that runs on Chinese chemistry, serves a French customer, and operates under a federal loan the county never co-signed, but whose success it now needs. That's not a betrayal. It may be the right industrial decision, but it's not the deal Glendale made. The plant lights back on in late 2027. The county will find out what this deal is actually worth.